Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, do I have a discussion for you today. Now, my last 2 weeks on Monday, I have been doing videos where I have done reviews of things, and those are great, and you can go watch them. But I wanted to do something a little bit different this week. I am here to tell you about something that you should definitely go consume, and while it is not a book, you still need to go ingest it, please. Please, dear God, please. And that is The Adventure Zone. Brought to you by the creators of My Brother and Me, and some folks on Polygon, which if you're a video game person, you'll recognize them from things like Monster Factory. The McElroy brothers and their dad sit down to play some Dungeons and Dragons. I spent probably the last 2 weeks of my life in an excessive amount listening to Taz or The Adventure Zone, or maybe one of the most beautiful podcasts ever created ever. I didn't realize how much I love live recorded Dungeons and Dragons shit until Griffin McElroy made something so beautiful I was sobbing. And it was told collaboratively. Now, this is a booktube channel. We talk about books, and some of you are saying, podcasts, not a book. Some of you also say audiobooks, not a book. To which I say, not sure I agree with you, because I am still taking in a story, and I am still enjoying something that people have spent hours and hours and hours creating that sweeps me up off my feet, puts me into a world that I have not lived in my whole life, and it moved me, literally moved me. And all of those things are things that I love about books. And all of those things also happen when playing Dungeons and Dragons. The thing I love about something like Taz is that it is completely impromptu. Griffin McElroy, the dungeon master, of course, has a story in mind that he is trying to tell, but his players can literally avoid everything that he lays in front of them. And they may not solve a puzzle that he has created, or he tries to do something and they figure out a way completely to avoid the next 20 minutes he had planned. And as someone who has dungeon mastered, that happens every single time you play. And it creates such an interesting environment where the person writing the story has actually very little control over where the story is going. A lot of authors I've heard talk about their creations say that their characters do things that they don't expect, and sort of talk about them as if they are their own people. Collaborative storytelling through role-playing, I think, is the embodiment of that, because they are actually other people. They aren't fractured portions of your mind that are inhabiting this other character, where it's still you, but they're actually other people and actually think differently and make different decisions and all of these things that you have very little control over. And to create a story that was so beautiful and so moving for me that I was actually sobbing multiple times during the storytelling of this is mind-boggling for me. It starts as improv comedy with them making jack-off jokes, but it goes somewhere where I was crying, and not only was I crying, but the people playing the goddamn game were crying. And that is so powerful. That is so astounding to me. They create a lovely story that has a whole lot of heart and inclusion, including LGBTQ plus characters, including different races and genders, and just all of these different stories that are not their own because they are for white dudes, but they felt important to highlight and show. And listening to them talk about it outside of like the amount of work and care that they put into portraying things properly, and if they portray things in a way that is upsetting to the fans, the next time they make something, they're trying to do it well and better. Really hard to navigate, but they do their best, and I appreciate it. And the fact that they're not just saying, I am a cis white straight dude and this is my story, which has been done so many times, makes it that much more important to listen to and see. And while they don't do it 100% correct all of the time, the fact that they listen to the criticism and try and figure out a way that works in their fiction to just make it better and make it more correct and make it what it needs to be is profoundly important. which doesn't always happen back here. And all of this left me there sitting going, I miss DMing. So I'm texting all of my friends and being like, hey, yo, you want to do some Dungeons and Dragons with me? But it also left me sitting there going, what is it that I actually love about books? And I think it is the storytelling. And there are different ways to tell stories. All of these things lead to a singular experience that people are sharing, which is the exact same thing that happens when you read a book, and it's the exact same thing that happens when you watch a movie, and it's the exact same thing that happens, etc., etc., etc. So when we talk about BookTube, obviously the thing that we love are these guys here, these wonderful, beautiful creations that people spend hours and hours and hours and hours working on. Make me sit by myself and cry. But there's other ways of doing that, guys, and I don't think that we should discount them. And in fact, I think that we should be talking about them. So it may not be a bookish podcast, so to speak, in that it's not people talking about books like our own, like Bibliomancy for Beginners or Sword and Laser or the New York Times Book Review or the Paris Review's new podcast or even LeVar Burton Reads. It's still something so profoundly moving, and they're doing it on the spot. And I want everybody to go listen to it and love it as much as I do. And looking at the community of fan artists and the community of people who just are so deep in the mud when it comes to their emotions for these characters that don't exist, aren't real, but for whatever reason touched all of us in a very profound way is important, and people should know about that. In the same way that I think people should know about any number of great reading books and should watch any number of brilliant moving films. And part of that has to do with storytelling, which I think actually, when it comes down to it, is the thing that I love about all of these mediums is whether or not there has been brilliant storytelling. All of the Taz arcs that I have listened to, including the 2 experimental mini arcs, have been great. All of that leads back to the same thing of they were able to use language and, at least in this case, language, because it's an audio format, there's no visuals, to create and put out something beautiful, literally beautiful. The thing about an audio podcast like this is that there are no visuals. So while I could definitely relate it to a movie because there's people doing stuff and there's action to it, there's more to it than text on a page, it is still literature in a way because it is still nothing but words. They're using nothing but words to cause such an emotional response in me. It's all storytelling and they do a brilliant job of it, and it's so important. And yes, they have a book coming out, they have a graphic novel coming out, which I have pre-ordered and I will discuss again when it comes up. But having had this experience with a podcast that I've never had before with a podcast that has impacted me in such a profound way, and it's still new. Like, podcasting has been around for a long time, but it's still a new media, and people are doing such interesting things with it when you look at like Night Vale, or when you look at any of these things that are created by these people who are just people like you and me sitting in their houses talking to each other and creating such beautiful stories. And it's important. Talk about collaborative storytelling, talk about all of these new forms of media that we're using to create new and interesting stories, and do they have a place here on BookTube, even though this is a very old form of media? And do you listen to some really great podcasts that have made you cry? What are they? Tell me about them. I want to know. Do you listen to Taz? Do you listen to Mabim Bam? Do you like comedy, or do you prefer, I don't know, something else? Give it to me. And if you want to see and hear the stuff that I'm doing with my Dungeons and Dragons, let me know that as well, even though we're going to be using Pathfinder, but still. Let me know that as well. I want to hear everybody's love for all sorts of things, and I don't want to create a war against different types of media because we are like, I'm a bookish person, so I like books, when there's no word for it. I'm a storytelling-ish type of person, and I like good stories, guys. Let's get some good stories out in the world.